Today's guest for Exit Interview is Rod Peterson. Rod was a long-time 45-year employee with the company, and he's got a story coming off a farm in Gilbert and starting construction work after a short stint in college. Rod is like MacGyver. There's nothing he can't do. He is self-taught, self-disciplined, he's measured, and he's got the voice of James Earl Jones. I hope you enjoy it. Rod Peterson. All right, so tell us about growing up. Where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
So I grew up a mile north of Gilbert. My dad was a farmer, and we were in that farming community up there.
Sure.
And I had asthma, so I couldn't do a lot of the stuff. I could work out in the field and that, so I was sort of limited on what I could do. But I ended up working for my uncle all through high school, who installed a chain link fence for Montgomery wards here in town. So he worked at the DOT, and he got off at 4. So I'd go work all day, and then he'd come and work, and we'd work till dark all summer.
Oh, darn.
So that sort of got me a little bit into the construction thing. I was really good at digging post holes and mixing cement, concrete by hand.
Oh, I'm sure.
In a box.
I'm sure. So you, how many siblings?
So I've got 2 sisters and then one brother who's passed away. So
and
I was number 2.
Okay.
This older sister, and then myself, and then my younger sister, and then my brother who passed away. So.
Okay. And did you go to school in Gilbert then?
Yep, went to school in Gilbert. Then graduated, and then I went to college at Wayne State University in Wayne, Nebraska.
All right, so let's stay in Gilbert here for a second. Okay. So in high school, did you play sports? Were you in the band? What did life look like?
The asthma sort of aged me out of the football side of things, but I played basketball.
Okay. Were you any good?
Oh, no, I was mediocre, I guess.
What were you good at? Were you a defender? Were you a shooter?
I was a defender and a rebounder.
Okay.
I had the highest vertical jump in the school.
Really?
At the time.
How? What was that?
It was 40 inches.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was getting up.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I can't do that now.
Yeah, me neither. Any other things about high school? Were you a motorhead? Did you like cars?
Yeah, well, I thought I was going to be a mechanic. Is what I sort of went into, because I like to make things work.
Sure.
So.
All right. So you graduate from Gilbert High School, and then you go to Wayne State.
Yep.
So why Wayne State?
Well, my sister was going out there.
Okay.
And another person in the community was going out there, so I went out there too. So I was in industrial education. I was going to maybe be a shop teacher.
Okay.
Kind of thing. So it was during Vietnam, so anybody that was going to school, men wouldn't get drafted. Well, they changed that the second year I was there, so the population of the men were about 2 to 1 to women, and then it changed that second year when they changed the draft status, and so it was about 50-50 then. So
okay. And so did you finish school at Wayne State? Did you get your industrial?
No, after that second year, in the summer, I started working for Allen Construction Company. That was sort of the beginning. Yeah, and I never went back.
Yeah, so why? So you elected to stop your education. You came back here and thought, well, I should get a job.
Yep. Yeah, mainly summer employment. And Larry Spurlick hired me.
What was your first meeting with Larry like? Like, how did you meet him? Did you turn in an application? Did you?
No. I just showed up at the job site, and at the time we had these old wooden buildings that they would move around as a job shack.
Okay.
And that's what it was, a job shack. And just walked in the door, and he talked to me a little bit and figured out I was a farm kid and I could probably do everything he wanted me to do. And he
Farm
says,
kid with asthma? Did you disclose your asthma at the time?
So I don't know if I told him or not, but he says, well, bring a hammer tomorrow. And I started there.
And where was there? So you found him at a job site.
So it was a job site. It was right on Lincoln Way. It was a Sambo's restaurant.
Okay.
That we were building. And so he had just started a few days before that. Larry had started his employment.
Okay.
And then this job started right then too. So.
And where on Lincoln Way? Like, reference it now. Where is it still? Is the building still there?
The building's not there anymore. It was the Mandarin.
Okay.
Now I think the building's gone now. So it's between
Clark and Kellogg.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think my employment records say I started in March, but I really started in, I think, April. It'd been after Larry. So 1972.
Got it. Okay, so you started then. You started as a laborer. So talk through your progression through the company and then.
So that building had, I think I was like his first employee. So we were starting from putting in foundations. It was masonry. Part of it was masonry. I remember one time he figured out I was a farm kid. So he sent me over to the warehouse, which was Union, JTS,
Mm-hmm.
and to pick up the forklift and drive it over to the job site. Well, the guys at the warehouse really didn't like me driving the forklift because I was not a union person.
Right.
They didn't like it a lot, I think.
Did they let you know it, or did they keep it
So,
to themselves?
oh, you could hear them in the background.
Okay.
Yeah. So I drove it over to the job site, and we set some lintels or something with it. That was my first experience with union versus non-union.
Sure.
Right there.
Well,
So.
and that was right at about the start of the double breasting, or were we pretty double breasted?
It was right at the start. It was Allen Construction, 72. There were other companies doing the same thing. Had a open shop side and a union side.
Right. All right. So you worked on that job,
Worked
then
there. Then Larry got me and started a little bit into some timekeeping, I think just because he didn't want to do it, or he had other things to do. So
Sure.
I started doing that a little bit, and then the job started out at Hawk Chemical, the concrete buildings, precast.
Right.
So we started that, and I was mainly a timekeeper, but we on-site cast all the precast there, those panels on the big building,
Okay.
Building 5.
Yep.
And he turned me into a sandblaster, so we'd cast the panels. Next morning we'd uncover them. I'd sandblast them to give them the finish, and then stand them up and store them. This was during the winter.
Okay.
So I was the timekeeper there. There was 2 buildings involved there. And then at some point, I ended up being a timekeeper for several jobs. That job, McFarland Clinic Edition, started up, Cliff Rogers. So I kept time there. And then later, probably 74, I was... Larry started Ames Golf and Country Club. So I was timekeeper for several jobs there. And that took up about all my time doing those things. So I drove an old 1957 Ford pickup, Allen Construction sign on it. At
Sure.
the time I drove it around.
So we've heard on this podcast several references to the timekeeper function, and several people did that. And it'd be helpful for me and maybe anybody else listening, like, what did that look like? walk me through your day at the peak of it when you were doing it on several jobs. What did you do?
So mainly it was just observing. We didn't really tell the people or ask them. It was mainly just an observation on what they were working on.
Yep.
We had a list of codes, different from what we've got now. They were listed as C was concrete items, E was edge form, and F was forming, and so they were different kind of
Sure.
numbering system. There was letters and numbers together. But you would observe, track it on a timesheet with the employees' names on it, and then tally it up at the end of the week, and then turn it in. So.
Did you turn quantities in with that
Yeah,
too?
and then there were quantities involved also, so that would get attached to the labor cost, and you could get unit costs out of it.
So when you were really rocking and rolling, and would you do 3 or 4 jobs at a time and do maybe a couple of observations per job per day?
Yeah, I would drive back and forth between them. Maybe I was at one job for maybe half the day. Just depending on what was going on. Like, I remember at Hawk, there was more than one job there, so we tracked them as separate jobs.
Got it.
And out at the country club, it was the same thing. There was some outside work and then the building work. So there are several jobs there.
So keep progressing. So you were timekeeper through the mid-'70s, and
Yeah, well, till like 74, and then JTS side had Vet Med, and they wanted Jim Stecker was the project engineer, and he was going to move out on site. So they needed somebody to sort of take over his role in the office. Was mainly, I was called a cost analyst. So I would collect all the information from the timesheets, and we would outsource them to a place with a computer over in Nevada. So I would track that, talk to timekeepers, talk to the superintendent, go over the costs with them each month. So we sort of kept a continuity between different jobs, so everybody was doing it the same way.
And did you do that on the Allen side and the JTS side then?
Yes, then I was a JTS employee.
Got it.
At that time. So that was 74, I think I went into the office.
And who was that firm in Nevada?
It was Nevada National Bank.
Okay.
So they had a computer and they had a programmer, and then he mainly wrote a program that allowed him to assemble all the costs, and then they'd give us printouts each month.
Okay.
So if we figured out somebody was charging time to the wrong place, then we would adjust the dollars, and I'd fill out forms to make that happen on the other end.
Okay.
And I also then tracked equipment costs. So the timekeepers would track equipment usage. Mainly we would hire equipment by the hour and track their use. And so our estimating was better than the company that we used. They would give us a bid, but we'd just hire them by the hour.
Got it.
And do that. So we accumulated those costs and had them too. But that was all longhand. I was doing it with a piece of paper and a pencil.
Do you have carpal tunnel from that today?
No.
Okay. Did the company own much equipment then that you would be tracking, or was it mostly rented?
The crane equipment we owned, but there was a company called C&M. It's Construct now.
Okay.
And they had a couple dozers and a backhoe, and we tracked their equipment for our use and had better costs on it than they did at the time, I think. So we always used them.
Okay.
Macinich was around then too. So cost analyst, I did that, and then I got estimating work added in, did a lot of quantity sheet extensions, multiply things out, write down the number. Somebody else would then check all those tabulations that went on. I mean, I do that for days on end on a bigger job.
Sure.
So I had a calculator that was electronic, and it had 2 memories in it.
That was pretty big time.
Yeah, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
So I know one of the superintendents that would come in and help, he had one of those, I don't know what you would call it now, but it was like a calculator, but you cranked a crank up on the top if you multiplied it. And if you divided, you cranked the crank the other way. And it was a tabulator or something. I don't know what the name of it was.
You did the quantity quantification and quantity extensions.
Yep, after somebody else maybe did the takeoff. So if somebody did the takeoff, a lot of times they would extend them, and then somebody would check them.
Got it. So who were you working with? Who were some of the names around at that time?
So at the time when I went into the office, Woody Buck was there, Ted Hagen, Dean Porras, Norm Reese, Dick Johnson, and then there was, and myself, Rob King. He was an engineer, Jim Stecker. And then there was a couple secretaries. So that was the extent right there.
Got it.
That was like 74. So I expanded a little bit and did more than estimating. I did some project engineering. I remember I worked for Cliff on the Gilbert Elementary School when it was first built. We branched out and went out of town to Woodward, and we did some renovations and buildings down there at the Woodward facility.
Okay.
We did a lot of work at the Silver Saddle Motel.
So those were a lot of buildings kinds of projects. What?
Yeah, that was buildings. So 83, a couple people left in the office, and one of them worked on the treatment plants. And we had just gotten the Fairfield project in 83. So then I ended up taking over that spot and then learned a lot about treatment plants at that job site.
So did anything happen down in Fairfield that was noteworthy in your life?
So we had a timekeeper down there that I met, and that's my wife now. So
darn. Funny how that
so
works.
So the trailer didn't smell like form oil anymore. It smelled more like a women's perfume when I walked in. So after that experience, then I was involved in a lot of treatment plants, mainly on the piping end. I did a lot of pipe takeoff, ordering materials for the job. So we had several that I was a project manager on. We did one at Iowa Falls, Fort Dodge, Atlantic, several projects in Marshalltown, wastewater. And then there was an Ames water plant. We did some renovations when it was beside the power plant.
Sure.
And then we did a water plant at Sheraton. So in the meantime, we were getting more computerized. We purchased just a single machine that had a digitizing type board on it. It was a Texonic. It was sort of a machine and software altogether, and used that some. And then we ended up changing to Timberline. And I don't know what the dates were there for sure, but had a couple machines and more PCs. I think we started a network with 6 computers and a server.
Right. So when that started, were your hands in that, or was somebody else doing that, and then eventually you got plugged into some of that?
No, I was sort of in on it from the beginning. We had a few people attend some seminars, and we decided to get Timberline. At the time, it was sort of a canned, the database was sort of a canned one, so then we revised it enough to work to our methods. Eventually, our methods sort of changed to the way they were. We were jumping through too many hoops to try to make it work for us. We turned around and let it work the other way. So we started out with just a network that had 6 estimating computers on it. And then we had an accounting computer that was a separate system altogether. So they didn't work together. Eventually they did, but the network kept expanding. Eventually it was 125 machines I was overseeing. So
how did you learn that? What were your, I know you well enough to know that you're curious and you're relentless and you'll figure it out, but what other resources were there? What other people in Ames or other places were part of that learning?
A lot of it was just sitting down and figuring it out. I did learn a lot from our computer supplier, and helped us with our network and that here in town. They helped a lot. So one thing is just to know the software and what you got to do it, but the other half is make the hardware work so it's going to do the things you want.
Right.
There's a lot of seminars were available at the time. Now it's all done under remote,
Right.
like everybody's doing now. But at the time, Microsoft would put stuff on. Timberline would do things. Every year, the Timberline would have a seminar out in Portland, where they were from, and we would go out there every year and learn a lot. So that was about the extent of it.
So there was softwares, and there was hardwares, and there were networks, and there were databases, and then there was the internet.
Yeah.
Did that blow your mind?
So we moved out to Bell Avenue, 300 South Bell,
Right.
in 96. So prior to that, we just had a network. It was a different type of wiring scheme. So when we moved out there, we went with the kind of wiring schematic that we have now. So that was a big change.
Sure.
We still didn't have internet into the building, but we used several machines had modems on them. And that was the connection to the rest of the world with those modems. So I think when we got our domain name, that was like in 97 is what I'm thinking. So you get connected and you try, we wanted story. Well, somebody else had that.
Oh, bastards.
SCC, somebody else had that. So we finally come up, I typed in StoryCon. Before it changed, I hit yes.
Yeah.
So, because there's other people doing things too, and you had to you didn't get it immediately. It took a little while. But so StoryCon.com, that's where that came from.
Okay. So there's one thing to keep remote softwares going and remote hardwares and get them linked up and connected. But then then eventually we had websites, and we had outside connectivity, and we had cybersecurity, and we had all of that. So you just had to kind of learn it as you went and figure it out.
It became more and more and more complicated. Now it's just a one-horse show, and it was a lot. See, at one time when we would have a larger job site, we didn't have that interconnectivity between office and the job site. We had phone lines, so we would actually put a small server out at a job site, and 5 or 6 or 10 computers out there. I know that we had one up at the Cedar Falls at the Performing Arts. Up there, we had several trailers there and a server and 6 or 8 computers.
Yep.
No wireless, so everything was wired. So we were crawling around underneath trailers and dragging wire everywhere. So that was the first one. We did one over at Boone, at the Boone Water Plant, USDA. Later there, we were able to do a little bit with a connection back to the office, because they had at that time there was a better connection.
So rewinding a little bit, in our conversation with Norm, he indicated that we had a strategic partnership with CPMI for the computerization of some things. Maybe.
Yeah, that was clear back during Vet Med, where they would do the scheduling.
Okay.
And they had a mainframe type of deal, and it was mainly on the scheduling. It was a scheduling and payment, I think, for the subs.
Got it. So not as much on the estimating, timekeeping, cost recording side of things?
No, it was that mainly was just on the schedule side.
Talking about computerization, I recall when I started back in the late 80s, early 90s, man, there was a 386 machine. That was fast.
That was a big deal.
That was bullet train fast until a 486 came out. And as you think back on technological advances, whether it's just in the world or in the company, what were some of those big inflection points? Boy.
Well, I remember we had some PCs. We had some Apples, and there was an Apple II and an Apple III. Well, the difference between the Apple II and the Apple III is the Apple III had upper and lowercase. The Apple II didn't. It had uppercase.
You're just shouting at people all the time.
But we used to list, what they call it list. We do the takeoff on the piece on quantity takeoff sheets, and you paperclip them all together, and then the estimator would list the job, and that's picking the items and then applying the quantities to them, and that was all written out longhand. So those all would get extended and added up. So when we ended up with some computers, we wouldn't plug the whole thing in. We would just go list the line items, so we wouldn't have to type everything back in. So mainly we'd use the computer just to add the columns up and get the page totals. The Apples really weren't connected. They were separate. But we ended up then going to the PCs before we networked them. So there was an 86 computer. That was before the 286 and before the 386 and before the 486. So I remember there was one jump that the processor speed doubled from the 86 to another brand. That was a big deal.
Yep. So I think when I started, Larry Spurlick still maybe used an Apple.
We had some Apples, and we had one that was called a Lisa, and that was right before we went to the PCs. But that was a big deal, the Lisa. But
I think I remember I've heard some of the Steve Jobs stories. That was like one of their creations, I think.
Yeah. It was an Apple product, but mainly we did scheduling with it, I remember.
Yeah, plotters, dot matrix printers.
Oh, yeah.
Big plotters.
So printing was the old dot matrix, and so they were noisier than heck. And I remember we built these little soundproof cabinets under people's desks so they wouldn't be hammering away as they printed. It used to be we would have cameras, and he was issuing cameras and making sure people had batteries and memory cards, and then all of a sudden the cell phones came out. So, do we want to give cell phones to everybody? Well, we finally did. Now they can take a picture and send it to somebody. Yeah. The communication, it used to be, it was a big deal when faxes came out.
Oh, baby.
It was a big deal. And it was on this paper that you could hardly write on it because it would scrape off.
Yeah.
But you would send a fax of a diagram or something you wanted to get, a question for an architect or engineer. So you were sketching something out before and sending it in the mail. And a week later you'd have the answer. Then it was a fax, and maybe you could get the answer in a day or two. Now it's a cell phone and a picture, and you can get an answer or get your information to them.
Well, and even
seconds.
now it's a video call.
Yeah.
Hey, let me show you what I'm dealing with.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Yep, it's instant now. So things have changed in that respect, just the communication thing.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot.
So as you think about, well, let's talk about stock ownership. So what did your ownership journey look like through the company?
I think Allen Construction, like in '74, offered stock to people. It was like a Class B stock. You didn't have voting rights, but you could buy some stock, and that's where I got my first stock, and I think it was '74.
Okay.
And then as people left, I was offered more stock, so I was able to buy more. But I remember the first big one, it was mainly, here it is, here's the amount you pay, write a check or whatever you want to do.
Sure.
And in my cleaning out for our move, I found a note that I had borrowed against the old car that I had for that money, and it was at 17% interest.
Wow.
Yeah, back in the 70s.
So do you recall who was selling at the time?
That was just like the first offer, I think.
Got it.
It was $6,000. I remember that.
Got it.
But then over the years, Charlie Bell, Marty Martinson, Gary Warning, a lot of them that left. There was probably 20 people that, as they retired and left, I was able to get stock. So.
Sure.
When Dean left, I got a lot, a big chunk then.
Yeah,
that was like
when you retired a few years ago, you had
almost 10%.
10% of the company. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And we're still paying.
5 more years.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
That's good. Yeah.
So you're talking about some people that I recall, some people that I remember. So talk a little bit about memorable friends that you had, people in the company or in the industry that made a real impression upon you, that helped to shape your personal and maybe professional career.
Well, probably the person who hired me, Larry Sperlich. Mm-hmm. He got me going, and he saw something there and thought, well, let's invest in this person. And so I've been here. I was here for 46 years.
Yeah.
Norm, Dean, that was sort of the beginnings. Norm, Dean, and Dick.
Right.
Were sort of the three after Ted left. So, and Ted, he didn't really care if you were educated or not. He treated everybody the same. So I think he owned like half the company at the time.
Right.
He owned the Sheldon Munn Hotel, I remember, and he took me up there and said, we're going to do a remodel up here. I'd done drafting when I was in college, and I drafted up some of the rooms, and he used those to get the building permit. So they took out walls and made them from hotel rooms to little apartments. So.
Do you recall then when he sold it, to whom he sold it, why he sold it?
I can't remember when it was for sure, but when he was going to turn 60, he was going to sell some of his company, or 62. It was before 65. And he was maybe going to be half-time or something. But when he left, he sort of never came back.
Vapor trail?
Yep. So, but then he sold. I didn't buy any of his stock. Gary Warning bought some of his stock. I remember.
Sure.
And then Dean and Dick and Norm.
All right. So you didn't do all this alone. So tell me about your family and how they acclimated to you being. You're kind of MacGyver. There's nothing you can't do. So tell me about Rana and your family.
Well, Rana had been married before, and I had been married. So we each had 2 kids.
Okay.
So Rana's son now, he's 20 years younger than me. So he's 49 right now. Tracy, her daughter, is 41. So they were both really into sports, and Todd played every sport. When we were in Nevada, he played every sport and lettered in every sport every year. And he went on and ran cross country at Simpson.
Okay.
So he was 8 years older than Rana's daughter. So about the time he was getting out the door, she started playing. So she played basketball, and
she was pretty good.
She was good, yeah. And we moved to Ankeny so she could play basketball there. And so she was played on 3 state tournament teams, and they won when she was a junior. And then she went on and got recruited and played at Creighton. And she was really lucky. Creighton has pharmacy school, and she wanted to be a pharmacist, so she got accepted there too, and
Great.
graduated as a pharmacist. So
I recall a period in time there where you put a couple miles on your vehicle.
when she was playing in college, so it was Creighton was in the Missouri Valley, and so they would usually go and they'd play. They call them traveling partners. So like Southwest Missouri State and Wichita are out and away, but they're fairly close together. So they would go out on a Thursday and play maybe Friday, Thursday, Saturday, or Friday, Sunday.
Got it.
So we would go out on those road games. So we didn't make it to all of them, but we made it to a bunch of them. The worst time was a Sunday night game at Wichita State. We left Wichita at 10 o'clock p.m. and drove home. So, and I was at work the next day. Ronna didn't make it to work. That's 6-hour drive from Wichita.
Right.
So that was the worst one.
Huh.
But she ended up, her senior year, they won the Missouri Valley, so they went and played in the NCAA tournament. That was a big deal.
How about your kids?
My kids, Jeremy and Shelley, are in between Todd and Tracy. So Jeremy has been in business for himself, a little small excavating company, and he sold it back when times weren't very good, and then he worked for a landscaper, and now he's gone out on his own again now. So he does snow removal and summer mowing and stuff for like home associations.
Sure.
Over in Iowa City area. So got eight grandkids, ranging from 22 years old to 7.
You see them often?
Lately, not.
Yeah, coronavirus.
Yep. So, but Todd's kids are in town, so we see them. So one's a junior and one's 8th grade. 22-year-old, he's a UPS driver, and Grace is 12. Levi is 12, I think, also 11 or 12, but they live in Tiffin.
Got it.
And then Tracy has 2 kids, almost 10 and almost 8, live in Council Bluffs.
When did you retire?
So I retired in December 10th of 2018. Where I'd worked a year ahead of that, just half time.
What has been occupying your time in retirement?
Well, with COVID going on, we haven't done any traveling. We've been doing this move thing for the last several months.
Sure.
And the year before, mainly just getting organized, I guess. You know, you let things go when you're really, really busy, and it seemed to be the case.
Well, yeah, so we'll start to land the plane here on some of these lines of questions, but you have done so much in the company and otherwise. What sort of counsel, advice, pearls of wisdom would you have for young people just in general, or young people in this industry?
So in my case, I was sort of in the right time at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
You know, Alan was just starting up, and there was opportunity there, but I think there's opportunities still. You know, it doesn't really matter how big the company is, you can still do things.
Yep. And
do things.
Travel while you're able.
Yep. Get out there and do it.
You've probably
I never thought we would do this, but we've been all over the world.
Yeah.
So all the continents except for Antarctica.
And if you waited till you were ready
Till now.
or till you were retired, then
We waited till now. My wife's had a stroke, so that's limited us a little bit.
yeah.
So if we'd have waited till now, none of it would have happened.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to pay for when you're working. Go away for 2 weeks and have 2 paychecks waiting for you. That's not too bad.
Yeah. Shh. Shh. Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. That's good advice. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming in.
Yes, you got it.
There you have it, straight from Rod. His story, and really the story of opportunity, the story of learning and being a consistent student and learner, being self-taught, and really figuring things out and problem solving. Rod is a very calming personality for almost anybody that's around him, and that's one of his legacies in the company. And while I had the benefit of seeing Rod, nobody else will through this medium, but as you would expect, he came in with his list. He has a record of about everything that he's done in the company through time, projects, those kinds of things, and he referred to it often. And that's when you get a little bit of Rod, that's what you get. Somebody who's buttoned up and somebody who's got it well documented, well thought through, and well reasoned. Big influence on anybody who has walked through the halls of Story. Thank you, Rod.